Sometimes love begins with a mistake, and sometimes that mistake changes everything. She was just a poor girl trying to survive another day, juggling double shifts, hospital bills, and a heart that had forgotten how to dream. He was a billionaire who had everything, except peace, purpose, or someone who saw beyond his last name. All it took was one wrong hug, one mix-up in a crowded airport. And suddenly, their lives collided in a way neither of them could have predicted or controlled. But this is not a fairy tale. This is a story about love that hurts before it heals, about walls being broken down slowly, painfully, and two people learning that real love isn't perfect, it's honest. So if you've ever felt out of place, like you weren't enough, like the world was too heavy for your heart, this story was written for you, and once you start it, you won't want to stop until you know how it ends. You'll feel every choice, every silence, every moment they almost give up, and every reason they don't. If this story touches your heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and keeps us bringing more emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone who still believes in love that shows up when you least expect it. JFK Airport in New York was alive with the energy of 1,000 different stories, colliding all at once. Announcements echoed above the shuffle of tired feet, and the wheels of overpacked suitcases clattered across the floor like a metallic symphony of goodbyes and reunions. Amid the chaos stood Hannah Brooks, small-framed, dressed in faded jeans and a light pink hoodie, her dark curls half pinned up in a hurried bun. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. She had been counting down the hours for this moment. Her older brother Ethan was finally coming home. Hannah clutched a handmade sign that read, "Welcome back, Trouble," scrawled in purple marker. She shifted from foot to foot, eyes scanning the crowd of travelers spilling out from international gates. Her heart pounded, half joy, half exhaustion. Life hadn't been easy lately. Double shifts at the airport cafe, worrying about rent, keeping her younger brother Noah's health in check. It all weighed on her. But today, for just a moment, things were supposed to feel lighter. And then there, just ahead, a tall figure in a charcoal coat, short dark hair, carrying a familiar-looking leather bag, walking with the same posture Ethan always had. Without thinking, Hannah rushed forward, her arms flung around the man's body, holding him tight. She buried her face in the lapel of his coat, breathing in the faint scent of musk and cedar. "Oh my God, I missed you so much," she said, her voice thick with laughter and emotion. "I thought you'd never." The man stiffened. Slowly, he peeled her arms off of him. And then she heard his voice, low, controlled, and confused. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." Her stomach dropped. When she pulled back, her eyes met piercing grey ones, unfamiliar, unreadable, and framed by a face she definitely didn't recognize. Chiseled, clean-shaven, with cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass and a presence so commanding that it silenced the world around him. She gasped, stepping back so quickly she nearly tripped over her own feet. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her cheeks flushed. "You look exactly like my brother, I swear. I wasn't— Oh, God!" The man raised one brow, his mouth twitching just slightly. Not quite a smile, but something lingered there. Curiosity, maybe. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Happens more often than you'd think, though usually not quite that enthusiastically." She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. "I didn't mean to. Hug a stranger," she muttered, clutching her sign against her chest like a shield. "This is mortifying." He glanced at the sign and then back at her. "Hannah?" a voice called from behind her. She turned. The real Ethan stood there, waving, his bag slung over his shoulder. He looked nothing like the man she'd just assaulted with affection. Great. When she turned back to the stranger, he was already walking away, his coat swaying slightly with each step. He didn't look back. That should have been the end of it. But something about the encounter clung to her, like static after a storm. The way he had looked at her, not with ridicule, but with a strange, lingering attention. Something passed between them, brief but magnetic. Later that night, back in her tiny apartment 2 trains away from the airport, Hannah lay in bed thinking about him. She didn't know his name. She'd never see him again. And yet, her mind replayed the way his voice had sounded amidst the chaos, how everything had gone quiet for just a second. Who was he? And why did that mistake feel like something more? At dawn, the cafe was already buzzing, and Hannah was behind the counter, her hair tied tighter than usual, trying to shake off the awkward memory. Her manager was barking orders, the espresso machine hissed, and Hannah was focused on keeping her world small and predictable, until the door opened, and he walked in. Same coat, same eyes, same quiet intensity. He looked around the cafe, small, modest, a place people came to forget the rush outside, and then he walked straight to the counter. Hannah froze. He stopped in front of her, studying her face like he was memorizing it. "I was hoping you'd be here," he said. Her hands tightened around the coffee pot. "Do you want something?" she asked cautiously. He gave a small nod. "Coffee, black, made by you." She blinked. "I came back for coffee." He leaned in slightly, his tone unreadable but teasing. "Let's just say I was curious if your coffee is as bold as your hugs." For a moment she didn't move, and then, despite herself, she laughed. The next morning Hannah tried to forget him. She wiped tables and refilled sugar dispensers with robotic precision. The memory of the accidental embrace at the airport clung to her like static, but she pushed it away, chalked it up to one of those embarrassing moments she'd laugh about in 5 years. Maybe, with enough therapy. The airport cafe wasn't glamorous. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the linoleum floors were scuffed from the thousands of travelers who'd passed through. The smell of burnt espresso clung to everything, and yet it was Hannah's little world, a predictable, steady rhythm she could count on in a life that rarely offered such stability. That is, until 9:04 a.m. The bell above the cafe door jingled. Hannah barely looked up from the espresso machine. Her hair was frizzing from the steam, and her apron was already stained with mocha syrup. "Good morning," she greeted, without glancing up. And then, silence. A silence that made her spine stiffen. She looked up. There he was, the man from the airport. He wasn't just walking through the door. He was commanding the space, like gravity subtly bending in his direction. Same tailored coat, same watch that looked like it cost more than her apartment, and those same grey eyes that studied everything like they could read thoughts people didn't even know they had. Liam Carter. Of course, she didn't know his name yet, but soon the world would make sure she never forgot it. He walked straight to her register. Her heart thudded somewhere near her throat. "You," she said, unable to mask her surprise. He smiled, just barely. "I was hoping you worked mornings." "You came back for coffee?" "I came back for you to make it." She blinked, unsure if she was being flirted with or psychologically evaluated. "I'm not sure it's worth a second visit. I'm willing to take the risk." He slid into the far booth by the window without another word. And just like that, Hannah's day had derailed. She made his coffee, extra hot, no sugar, no cream. As she brought it over, her hands trembled slightly, and she cursed herself for caring. "Let me know if it tastes like disappointment," she said, placing it gently on the table. "I don't expect anything less than extraordinary," he replied, meeting her eyes with infuriating calm. She retreated behind the counter and spent the next 20 minutes pretending not to look at him. But he didn't scroll through his phone or bury himself in a laptop like every other customer. He simply sipped, observed, and stayed. And he came back the next day, and the day after that. Always at the same time, always at the same booth, always ordering the same coffee, only if she made it. At first, her co-workers teased her. One asked if he was a secret admirer. Another whispered that he was probably a food critic in disguise. But Hannah knew better. He wasn't interested in her coffee. He was interested in her, and that terrified her more than she'd like to admit. On the 4th morning, he arrived wearing a navy scarf that made his eyes seem bluer somehow. The cafe was busier than usual, and Hannah was rushing between orders when she noticed him standing quietly by the counter waiting for her. She took a breath, wiped her hands, and approached. "You really don't have to wait for me every day, you know." "But I want to." "Dice, why?" she asked, folding her arms, the edges of her voice sharper than intended. His expression didn't change. "Because you're real." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" "You're not performing," he said simply. "You don't care who I am. That's rare." She stared at him, uncertain how to respond. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the counter toward her. "In case you ever need anything." She didn't take it. "I don't take handouts," she said firmly. "It's not a handout, it's an open door." She glanced at the name printed in elegant serif letters, Liam Carter, CEO, Carter Enterprises. Her stomach dropped. Carter Enterprises, the massive holding company known for its media, tech, and hospitality empires. She'd heard the name countless times in headlines she could never relate to. She was talking to one of the richest men in the country, and he was coming into her cafe like it was a corner bakery in a small town. "Why me?" she asked quietly. His answer was just as quiet. "Because you didn't flinch when you found out who I am." "I haven't decided if I like you yet." He smiled. "Fair enough." And then he left. But something stayed behind. A presence, a tension, a question that refused to leave the back of her mind. What did a man like that really want with a girl like her? The next morning, when she opened the cafe, she found a small potted plant on her usual prep station. A single note was attached. "Even the strongest roots grow better when someone cares." There was no signature, but she knew. It was him. And for the first time, she felt the line between their worlds blur, just a little. For the first time in weeks, Hannah allowed herself to smile on the walk home. The sky over Queens was bruised purple with the fading sun, and the streets pulsed with the kind of noise that never truly stopped. Horns blaring, heels clacking, someone shouting 2 blocks away. But somehow, after another strange and quiet visit from Liam that morning, everything felt quieter. Or maybe she just felt less alone in the noise. It didn't make sense. Nothing about him did. He hadn't asked for anything, hadn't made a move, hadn't even hinted at interest in the typical way. He just showed up, calm and observant, like he wasn't trying to impress anyone. But in the kitchen of their tiny apartment, reality snapped back hard. Noah was curled up on the couch, pale and sweating, a damp cloth on his forehead. Hannah's heart sank at the sight of him. Their younger brother had been struggling for months now. Fatigue, nausea, weight loss. The doctors had finally given a name to the monster. Early-stage renal failure. Treatable, yes, but expensive. And fast-moving. She knelt beside him, brushing hair from his clammy forehead. "Hey, you okay?" He forced a smile. "Just tired." She swallowed hard. She couldn't tell him that the insurance was barely covering diagnostics, let alone the actual surgery. Their mother's life insurance had gone to funeral costs. Ethan helped where he could, but he had a family now. It had always been Hannah's job to keep things afloat, and she was drowning. That night, after Noah was asleep, she sat in the cramped kitchen staring at a stack of medical estimates that made her stomach twist. The zeros blurred, the deadlines pressed like weights on her chest. She didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd run out of tears weeks ago. She just whispered, "What am I going to do?" 2 days later, Liam didn't come to the cafe, and she missed him. God help her, she did. On the 3rd day he returned. Same quiet presence, same sharp eyes. But something in him had changed. He looked unsettled, as if he'd been thinking too hard about something he didn't know how to say. After his coffee, he waited until the last customer had left. Then he stood at the counter and said quietly, "Do you have 10 minutes?" She glanced at her manager, who was in the back. "Depends. Is this about coffee beans or something more dangerous?" "More dangerous," he said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Fine." But if I end up in a van with tinted windows, I'm screaming." He didn't laugh. They sat in his car outside, a sleek black vehicle she didn't dare touch too much. She sat stiffly, her arms crossed, the warmth of the leather doing nothing to ease the tightness in her chest. Liam stared ahead for a moment before turning to her. "I know something's wrong." Hannah blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're in pain, not just stress or exhaustion. It's something deeper, and I've been thinking for days how to ask without crossing a line." She frowned, trying to form a wall between them. "Everyone has problems. I can help." "No offense," she said sharply, "but pity isn't attractive." "It's not pity." He reached into the glove box and pulled out a thick envelope. "I had a feeling," he said, "so I made a call. I know a specialist in renal cases, Dr. Salvatore. One of the best. He already reviewed the case and is willing to take your brother immediately." Hannah's mouth fell open. "What? How? It's covered. All of it. Surgery, post-care, transport, everything." Her voice trembled. "Why would you do this?" He looked at her, serious. "Because I can." She shook her head, throat tight. "People don't just do things like this. There's always a catch." "There is." He leaned in, but his tone was still calm. "I want you to cook for me." She blinked. "Cook?" "In my home," he continued. "Every evening for 1 week, breakfast if you like, nothing more." She couldn't process what he was saying. "You want me to come to your penthouse and cook?" "Yes. You can hire any chef in the city." "I don't want a chef, I want you." "Why?" He hesitated, then said, "Because food tastes different when it's made by someone who feels something. Every cup of coffee you've made has more honesty than 1,000 business lunches I've had in glass towers." Her lip trembled, but she bit it hard to keep her voice steady. "What does cooking for you have to do with helping my brother?" "Nothing, except I needed to give you a reason. One that would make it less of a handout. This way it's an exchange, a contract." "I'm not sure that makes it better." "Maybe not. But it gives you a choice." He slid the envelope toward her. She stared at it. She thought about Noah, about the hospital rooms, about the machines, about the time running out. She didn't trust Liam Carter, but she trusted what her brother meant to her. She took the envelope, and Liam smiled, not with triumph, but with something closer to relief. "When do I start?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll have a car pick you up." "And what exactly am I cooking?" He glanced at her, amused. "Surprise me." But as the car pulled away and her fingers tightened on the envelope, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just said yes to something far more complicated than a simple meal. The black car arrived at precisely 6 p.m. Hannah stood on the sidewalk, hugging her coat tightly around herself, as the sun dipped below the buildings. Her hands were trembling, not from cold, but from nerves. This was no longer just about Liam Carter. This was about walking willingly into a world that had never belonged to her. The driver greeted her by name and opened the door like she was royalty. The inside of the car smelled like leather and faint cologne. Her jeans felt out of place against the smooth upholstery. The ride took less than 15 minutes, but every second stretched tight with anxiety. When they arrived, she stepped out onto the private driveway of a glass and steel building that scraped the sky. The doorman already knew her name. The elevator had no buttons, just a sensor. It opened silently and ascended faster than she expected, her stomach lurching as the city shrank beneath her. When the doors opened, she stepped into another universe. His apartment was unreal. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave way to a panoramic view of Manhattan that stole her breath. Polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of recessed lighting. Every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a museum, sleek, expensive, cold. She clutched the handles of her canvas tote bag like it was armor. "You came," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Liam standing by the window, barefoot, his white shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, holding a glass of water like he wasn't the richest man in the room, because he was the only one in the room. "I wasn't sure you'd go through with it," he added. Hannah exhaled. I wasn't either. He gestured toward the open-concept kitchen, which looked more like an art installation than a space where people actually cooked. I had the staff stock the fridge with everything on your list, he said. Organic, local, and some ingredients I've never even heard of. You don't cook? She asked, eyebrows lifting. I don't even boil water. She walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. It was full of fresh herbs, vegetables, cheeses, and homemade broths, everything she'd requested. She blinked, surprised he'd actually followed it. I wasn't joking, he said, watching her expression. If you're going to cook, you need what you trust. She gave a cautious nod, then pulled out the ingredients for her first dish, chicken stew with white wine, rosemary, and roasted garlic. Simple, comforting, hers. While she chopped, he lingered in the background, quiet. She didn't know what to say to him in this space. He seemed more human in the cafe. Here, he was polished, powerful, almost unreachable. So, this is your life? She asked after a while. He leaned against the kitchen island, hands in his pockets. Not all of it, just the part that looks good from the outside. She glanced at him. And the inside? He was quiet for a moment. Quieter than people imagine, he said. And lonelier. His honesty caught her off guard. They didn't speak again until she served dinner, just 2 plates, placed at a long dining table that could easily seat 20. The silence was thick, but not hostile. She sat across from him, watching him take the first bite. His eyes closed for a second longer than necessary. This is... He paused. Comforting. Not exactly a Michelin review, but I'll take it. He smiled faintly. Do you cook like this every night at home? I try. Noah's not picky, but he gets tired of soup pretty fast. His eyes softened. How is he? Better, thanks to you. No, he said. Thanks to you, for letting me help. She didn't respond. Instead, she took another bite and let the silence hold what words couldn't. Over the next few days, a rhythm formed. Every evening at 6:30, she arrived with a new recipe. Each dish came with a story. Her grandmother's Sunday roast, a stew her mum made before long shifts, a pie she once sold at a church fundraiser. Liam listened, not the way men pretend to listen. He listened. In turn, he began to share. Small things at first. His favorite books. The apartment he grew up in, cramped, noisy, full of shouting. The silence he bought later in life. He never interrupted, never rushed her. On the 4th night, as she made handmade ravioli, she asked without looking up, Why me, Liam? He leaned against the counter, arms folded. You don't pretend. She glanced at him. Everyone pretends. You don't. Not even when you're scared. She didn't know what to say to that. So she rolled more dough. Later that night, after dinner, they stood by the window looking out over the sparkling city. You ever think about running away? He asked suddenly. Every day, she said softly. Where would you go? I don't know, she replied. Somewhere with silence and a kitchen. He chuckled. You know, I've spent most of my life building walls. I thought it made me safe. But now, I'm starting to think it just made me hard to reach. She turned to him. What changed? He looked at her. You. As she looked away. That night, as she packed up to leave, he followed her to the door. You don't have to come back tomorrow, he said quietly. She froze. He added, if this feels too much. She shook her head. I'll be here. Then she stepped into the elevator and left. But as the doors closed between them, Hannah leaned her forehead against the mirrored wall and exhaled slowly. She was falling. And she wasn't ready for what came next. It started with the way he watched her. Not with hunger, not with ownership, but with a kind of quiet awe, like he was studying something fragile, something he wasn't sure he deserved to touch. Hannah noticed it more with each passing evening. She'd be stirring a sauce and his gaze would linger, not on her face, not on her body, but on her hands, on the care she gave to every motion. She'd laugh softly at a memory, and he'd pause like he wanted to memorize the sound. There were no declarations, no dramatic moments, just presence. And somehow that was louder than anything else. By the fifth night, the edges of their conversations had softened. Liam sat on the marble island as Hannah cooked something simple. Tomato bisque with grilled cheese made on rosemary focaccia, her favorite comfort meal. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly without looking at him. "Regret what?" "Having all this." She gestured toward the apartment. "Money, power, the silence." He was quiet for a moment. "I used to think success would make the noise in my head stop," he said. "Turns out, it just changed the pitch." She looked up at him. "You mean it made it lonelier?" He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "I was 12 when I realized no one was coming to save me, so I decided I'd never need anyone again." "And did it work?" "For a while." She nodded. "I used to think if I just worked hard enough, I could hold everything together. But it turns out people fall apart no matter how strong you try to be for them." Their eyes met. There was something raw in the silence that followed. Not romantic, not yet, but honest, bare. And that was more dangerous than desire. After dinner, Liam offered her tea. She was about to decline when she noticed his hand tremble ever so slightly as he poured it. "Are you okay?" she asked. He set the teapot down slowly. "I've had nightmares for 20 years. Some nights I sleep. Most nights I don't." She hadn't expected that. "What kind?" He sat down across from her, not looking for pity, just unburdening. "Fire, screaming, silence. Sometimes my father's voice, sometimes my own." She placed her mug down. "You don't talk about it with anyone?" "No one stays long enough to ask." "Well," she said softly, "I'm still here." He looked at her then, like he wasn't sure why that sentence hit him so hard. And that night, when she left, he didn't walk her to the elevator. He just stood in the kitchen, hands in his pockets, and watched her disappear. But what she didn't know was that he stayed up until 3 a.m., rereading a letter from his childhood, a letter from his mother, written before she left for good. And for the first time in years, it didn't hurt as much. On the 6th night, Hannah brought a photo of her family. It wasn't intentional. It had been tucked into a recipe notebook she carried. But when it fell out onto the counter, Liam picked it up. "That's Noah," she said. "And Ethan. That was taken on my mom's birthday." He studied it carefully. "You look happy." "We were, that year anyway, before everything fell apart." He handed it back gently. "You were the glue, weren't you?" She gave a tired smile. "Still am." "Does anyone take care of you, Hannah?" The question lodged itself in her chest. "No," she said, "but that's not their fault. I never let them." He nodded like he understood more than he let on. She looked at him. "What about you? Who do you call when everything falls apart?" "I don't." "Why not?" "Because I built a life where no one sees me fall." Her voice softened. "That sounds exhausting." "It is." They stood like that, between the countertop and a chasm of unspoken things. Neither crossed it. But something between them did. That evening she found herself lingering longer. After the dishes were washed, they sat on the floor by the fireplace, her back against the wall, his arm draped over his knee. "Tell me something you've never said out loud," she whispered. He thought for a long moment. "I hate champagne," he said. She laughed, not expecting that. "Seriously?" "I think it tastes like regret and burnt promises." She grinned. "Wow, that's oddly poetic." "Your turn." She bit her lip. "Okay, sometimes I pretend the cafe is a restaurant, a real one. With a menu I created, dishes I designed, just for a minute, just to feel like something is mine." He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "You deserve more than a minute." Something shifted then. It wasn't grand, it wasn't cinematic, but it was real. When she left that night, she stood in the elevator a little longer before pressing the button. She didn't know where this was going. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to run. It started with a box. Hannah found it waiting for her in the cafe's back room, wrapped in pale gold paper, tied with a satin ribbon too elegant for her surroundings. She stared at it for a long moment, as if it might explode. Her name was handwritten on a small ivory card in a script so delicate it made her stomach twist. She didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Still, her fingers undid the ribbon slowly, like peeling back a secret she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Inside, a navy blue gown. Simple, stunning, timeless. Silk that shimmered under the fluorescent light. Alongside it, a smaller velvet box. Inside that, a pair of delicate earrings and a matching bracelet. At the bottom, a note. Dinner. Friday at 8. Black tie. Don't argue. L. Her first instinct was to return it. Her second was to burn it. Instead, she sat there holding the fabric, her thumb tracing the hemline. The dress was beautiful. More than that, it was intentional. He'd picked it for her, not something flashy, not something to make her someone else, but something that said, "I see you." And it terrified her. That night, she found him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled, sipping tea. "You could have just asked," she said, holding up the note. "I did. You ordered." He smiled. "Only because I knew you'd say no if I asked." She crossed her arms. "What is this dinner exactly?" "A benefit gala for one of the hospitals we sponsor. It's a formal event, press will be there, donors, board members." "Ah, so you want to parade the charity case?" He froze. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think, Liam," she said. "You've been kind and private, and now suddenly you want to introduce me to the world." He set down the mug gently. "I want you there because I want you there, not for anyone else." She hesitated. "I don't belong in your world," she said softly. He stepped closer, not touching her, just present. "Then let me walk with you in yours." Friday came faster than she expected. The car was waiting, as promised, and when she arrived at Liam's apartment, the entire penthouse was quiet. He met her in the foyer, and for a moment, they both just looked at each other. Hannah in the midnight blue gown, her curls pinned back loosely, a small clutch in her hand that didn't match anything. Liam in a classic black tuxedo, no tie, the top button undone, like elegance was a second skin to him. "How you look," he started, then stopped. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't you dare say nice." He smiled, eyes never leaving her. "You look like the sky right before the stars come out." She blinked, caught off guard. Then he offered his arm, and she took it. The venue was breathtaking. Glass chandeliers, marble floors, music that floated through the air like perfume. Waiters passed with trays of champagne and truffle canapes. Hannah's heels clicked nervously as they stepped inside. Every head turned, and every smile came with judgment behind it. She felt it instantly, the questioning eyes, the curious stares, the whispered speculation. She tried to keep her posture straight, her smile polite, but inside, her nerves were unraveling like thread pulled too tight. "Relax," Liam whispered at her side. "You're doing fine." "I feel like I'm on display," she murmured. "You are. So am I. That's their game. But we don't have to play." She tried to focus on the warmth of his hand on the small of her back, on the sound of his voice when he introduced her to colleagues. He never said who she was, never tried to explain her presence. He just let her be. But then came Victoria. Blonde, tall, draped in scarlet silk and a smirk. She approached with slow confidence, drink in hand, eyes flicking over Hannah like she was lint to be brushed off a designer jacket. "Liam," she said smoothly, "didn't realize you were bringing your barista tonight." "Actually," Liam replied, "Hannah's a chef." Victoria smiled without warmth. Of course she is. Hannah didn't flinch, not visibly, but inside a sharp crack echoed, something between embarrassment and rage. Victoria leaned closer, voice low and condescending. Just be careful, sweetheart. This world likes to eat girls like you alive. Before Hannah could respond, Liam stepped forward, placing himself firmly between the two women. Enough, Victoria. She looked startled. I brought Hannah because I admire her, he said clearly, because she's intelligent, kind, and stronger than anyone in this room, and if anyone here can't see that, they don't belong at my table. The air went still. Victoria blinked, then turned sharply and walked away. Hannah stood frozen. Liam turned to her, his voice soft again. You okay? I don't know, she whispered. Want to leave? She looked around at the room full of masks and whispers, then back at him. No, she said. I want dessert. He laughed, genuine, full-bodied, and she realized she could survive here, because she wasn't alone. Later that night, back in the car, her heels were off and the earrings were tucked in her palm. I'm sorry about earlier, Liam said. I didn't think Victoria would be there. I'm not, Hannah said. He glanced at her, surprised. I needed to know what this feels like, she continued, to walk into fire and not burn. You didn't just survive, he said. You owned the room. She smiled tiredly. I still hate champagne. So do I. He reached over, gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was quiet, but it sent something shivering through her. Neither said what they were thinking, but both knew the distance between them was almost gone. It started with a photo, one moment, one angle. A shot of Hannah in the navy blue gown, her hand resting on Liam's arm, her head tilted slightly toward him in a half laugh. The headline read, Mysterious Woman Steals the Spotlight Beside Billionaire Liam Carter. By morning it was everywhere. Gossip blogs, business news, social media. Every site had a different spin, some calling her a rising culinary star, others labeling her an opportunistic outsider. A few simply asked, who is she, and what does she want? But the worst weren't the headlines, and it was the comments. Strangers who knew nothing about her, dissecting her face, her dress, her body, accusing her of chasing money, mocking her background, dismissing her as nothing more than a gold digger with a pretty smile. By the time she arrived at the cafe that morning, she already knew something had changed. The place was buzzing, not with coffee orders, but with her name. Hey, celebrity, a co-worker teased. Don't forget us little people when you move into a penthouse. Did he buy you that dress too? Someone else asked, laughing. Her manager pulled her aside. You might want to take a few days off, he said gently. It's gotten loud. Hannah nodded, heart pounding, but said nothing. She walked out before her hands could start shaking. She didn't go home. Instead, she walked. Through the city. Past strangers glued to phones that might be showing her face. Past boutiques with mannequins that wore the kind of life she never imagined for herself. By the time she reached Liam's building, her shoes were blistering her feet, and her anger was burning hotter than ever. She didn't wait for the elevator. She took the stairs. 15 floors. She needed the ache in her legs to match the one in her chest. He opened the door before she could knock, and just stood there. Hannah, you knew, she said, voice sharp. I didn't know this would happen. But you knew something would. You invited me into your world like it wouldn't cost me anything. He stepped aside to let her in, but she didn't move. I should have seen it coming, she said. The cameras, the attention. You knew what it meant to walk into that room with me. You knew they'd come after me. I was trying to include you. You were trying to feel good about yourself, she snapped, to prove you're the kind of man who could love someone like me. But this isn't love, Liam. This is a spotlight, and I didn't ask for it. He looked stricken, hurt even, but she couldn't stop. At the cafe, I was me. I had control. I had space to breathe. But now I'm a headline, a punchline, and I'm not built for this. I never wanted to hurt you, he said softly. But you did, she whispered. because you don't understand what it's like to be on the outside of everything. To be judged before you speak, to have your worth decided by strangers. He stepped closer. Then let me fix it. You can't. Her voice cracked. You can't buy my silence, or erase the comments, or make this go away. And even if you could, I don't want to be a problem you solve. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What do you want? She looked at him, this man who had opened doors and hearts, and still somehow didn't know the one thing she needed most. Space, she said, to remember who I was before you. He didn't try to stop her as she turned and walked away, and that, more than anything, made her want to collapse. The city looked different that night, colder, harsher. She walked aimlessly until she found herself on a park bench, phone vibrating in her pocket from messages she refused to read. Her chest ached, her mind replaying every word, every glance, every moment that had led to this rupture. She thought of Noah, of the surgery, of the contract, of everything that had begun with a mistake and blossomed into something real. And now it was unraveling. Because love, when exposed to the world, becomes fragile. And she wasn't sure if theirs could survive the glare. 3 days passed in silence. Hannah didn't return his calls, didn't open his messages, didn't walk through the cafe doors. It was as if she had stepped out of the frame of his world and left only the imprint of her absence behind. Liam had been alone before, but this was different. This was the kind of silence that echoed, the kind that made his home, with its soaring ceilings and curated art, feel like a mausoleum. He walked through rooms that now felt too large, too polished, too hollow. Everywhere he looked, he saw her, her laugh bouncing off the kitchen walls, her hand brushing the edges of a recipe card, her presence like light where there had once been only clean, expensive darkness. He didn't chase her, not because he didn't care, but because he did. He knew Hannah needed space, and space, he'd come to learn, was not distance. It was trust. Hannah spent the next 3 days avoiding mirrors. She didn't want to see herself as the world saw her now, reduced to a clickbait narrative, reduced to his... She volunteered at Noah's clinic, helped organize medication at the pharmacy, swept floors that didn't belong to her just to feel useful. But her heart hadn't caught up. She still felt the imprint of his fingers brushing hers, his voice when he said, "You don't pretend," the way he'd defended her in front of Victoria. She missed him, and that made her angry. On the 4th day, while cleaning out the drawers in her mother's old desk, Hannah found something she hadn't seen in years, a yellowed folder labeled Brooks Family, Final Notice. It was from when she was 16. The year their family's restaurant, their dream, their legacy, had been taken from them. She opened it. The papers were brittle with time, legal notices, foreclosure warnings, letters from lawyers with signatures she couldn't pronounce back then. Now they stabbed like knives. At the top of one document, stamped in red, "Acquired by Carter Enterprises," her breath caught. She flipped through the pages, faster, her fingers trembling. It was there, again and again. Her family's restaurant, the place where she'd learned to cook, where her parents had poured every ounce of hope they had, hadn't just failed. It had been swallowed. By his company. By him. Her knees gave out, and she sat on the floor, the folder in her lap, heart racing. Her memories rewound in fragments. Her father's silence at the dinner table the night they lost the restaurant, her mother crying in the pantry. The way no one had answers, just blame and exhaustion. And all this time. Liam had known. She didn't call, didn't text. She showed up. Stormed through the lobby of his building, ignored the doorman's polite confusion, took the elevator with a fury that matched the storm outside. When Liam opened the door, he barely had time to speak. She threw the folder at his chest. He caught it instinctively, brows furrowing. "What is this?" "You tell me." He opened the folder, read. went pale. "You knew," she said, her voice low, shaking. "You knew, and you let me sit in your kitchen like a fool." He looked up, stunned. "Hannah, I didn't know." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not." He stepped toward her, but she recoiled. "I swear to you, I didn't know your family's restaurant was tied to one of our acquisitions. That was a decade ago. I was still in grad school. That division wasn't even under me at the time." She shook her head, tears burning. "But it was your name, your company, your empire." "I know," he said softly, "and if I could change that, I would." She wanted to scream, to hit something, to unfeel everything. "That restaurant was my childhood," she whispered. "It was the only place we were whole, and your company erased it, like it was just another number on a spreadsheet." "Joyce, I didn't erase it," he said, "but I will make it right." She laughed bitterly. "You can't just throw money at this, Liam. You can't fix this with another envelope." "I'm not offering money." "Then what?" He looked at her like he was deciding whether to say something that might break him open. "I'm offering to listen, to carry it with you, not solve it, not explain it away, just carry it." She stared at him. Her heart was breaking in a dozen directions. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. "Then I'll wait," he replied, "even if you never do." That broke her. Because real love, the kind that waits without pushing, that accepts rejection without resentment, that was harder to bear than betrayal. She turned and left, and for the second time she walked away from him. But this time, she didn't slam the door. The first thing she noticed was the envelope on her doorstep. No name, no seal. Just a plain, cream-colored envelope tucked neatly under her doormat. Hannah stared at it for a long time before picking it up, her fingers hesitant. Inside, a single folded sheet of paper and a key. Her heart stalled. The letter was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged near the end, as if someone had paused too long. "Hannah, I can't change what my name took from your family, but maybe I can give back what it meant. This time not as Liam Carter, just as a man who never wanted to hurt you. If you're ready to see it, come. No expectations, no words needed. Just come. L." The key was small, silver, with a number etched into the side. 227, and beneath that, an address. She knew that address. She'd lived that address in her memories. It was the place where everything began, the place where everything had ended. She took the subway. Not the car he sent. Rain streaked down the windows like the sky was being washed clean of something. Her fingers clutched the key like it was a lifeline and a warning all at once. When she stepped off the train and turned the corner into the old block of her childhood, her breath caught. The restaurant stood there, alive, restored. The chipped paint was gone. The front window gleamed, and inside, the space glowed with soft golden light. The door had a new sign, hand-painted in bold, delicate strokes. Brooks & Sons Homestyle Cooking. She walked in slowly, like she might break the illusion if she moved too fast. It smelled like home. Not just food, but cinnamon, lemon oil, worn wood. The chairs were the same model her father used to polish every Saturday. The floor tiles had been restored to their original checkerboard pattern. The tiny chalkboard menu behind the counter had her mother's favorite phrase at the top, "Love begins in the kitchen." She turned and saw Liam standing at the back near the open kitchen. Alone. No photographers, no grand gestures, just him. He didn't speak, just held out his hand and placed a folder on the counter. She opened it. Inside, the deed to the building. In her name. Entirely paid. No conditions. No signature from him. Just a notarized document that said, "This is yours." Her hands trembled. "Why?" she whispered. "Because it should have always been yours," he said, "and because I'm not trying to earn your forgiveness. I just want to give back what was taken." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. "Why now?" she asked. "Because love that costs nothing isn't love," he said. "It's convenience, and I'm not offering convenience. I'm offering a future, one I'm not part of unless you want me to be." She looked down at the deed, and then back at him. There was nothing polished about him tonight, no tailored suit, no rehearsed charm, just a man stripped of pride, standing in the one place he thought might reach her heart again. "I didn't think you'd do it," she whispered. "I almost didn't," he replied, "because I thought, what if it's not enough?" "It's not," she said. He nodded. "But it's honest," she continued, "and that means something." He stepped back, giving her space. Then he turned to leave. But before he reached the door, a nurse called her cell. "Noah, emergency." The call was short and terrifying. She turned to Liam. I have to go," she said, voice shaking. He didn't ask, didn't hesitate. "I'll drive." At the hospital, everything blurred. Doctors in white coats, clipboards, the smell of antiseptic. Hannah's heart felt like it was being wrung out in real time. Noah's body had rejected one of the medications. A reaction. Nothing fatal, but serious enough to require overnight monitoring and new labs. Hannah's knees gave out in the waiting room. Liam sat beside her. Didn't speak, didn't touch. Just waited. When the doctor finally came out and said Noah was stable, the weight of it hit her like a wave. She sank forward, breathing hard, and Liam caught her, not possessively, not protectively, just there. And in that moment she realized, this was what love was. Not big speeches, not perfect endings, but showing up, staying, and not leaving when things fall apart. Later, when the hospital fell into the soft silence of 3 a.m., she found him outside, leaning on the railing of the garden terrace. She walked up beside him, arms crossed. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to—" "I know," she interrupted, "but I want to." They stood like that, in quiet, breathing in the night. Then she said, "You rebuilt the restaurant. For you." "No," she corrected. "For us." But he turned toward her. She looked up at him. "I'm not saying it's fixed," she said. "I'm still angry, I'm still scared, but I don't want to keep running." His hand brushed hers. Not demanding, just waiting. She took it and didn't let go. The hospital garden was nearly empty. Just a few scattered benches, patches of trimmed grass and the glow of soft lamplight trying to push back the weight of 4 a.m. Stillness hung in the air like a secret too heavy to speak. Hannah stood beneath a tree whose branches swayed slightly in the early morning breeze. Her coat was wrapped tightly around her, arms folded, but her chest was open, vulnerable in a way it hadn't been in years. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't need to turn around. "It's quiet," Liam said, stepping beside her. She nodded, almost peaceful. They stood like that for a long time, not saying anything, just breathing the same air, letting silence settle in places where words might only bruise. "Noah's sleeping," she said softly. "Stable. The doctors say he'll be okay." Liam exhaled slowly. "Good." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "You stayed." "Of course." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She turned her face back toward the garden. The lamplight caught the edge of her profile, casting golden shadows across her cheek. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to trust it. You. Us." He didn't respond at first. His hands were deep in the pockets of his coat like he was afraid they might betray him. "I don't either," he finally said. "But I know I want to try." She looked at him. Really looked. The way his eyes didn't flinch. The way he didn't rush to fix her fears. He just stood beside them like someone who understood what it meant to hurt and still choose to stay. "I was so angry at you," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I hated you." "You had every right." "I don't anymore." Her voice cracked at the edges. I'm still scared, Liam. He turned fully toward her now. His expression wasn't perfect or polished, it was open, raw. I'm scared too, he admitted, because you matter. And I've spent most of my life making sure nothing did. She let the words hang between them like breath on cold glass. Then, quietly, bravely, she stepped closer. Not enough to touch, just enough to feel the gravity shift. I don't want perfect, she said. I want real. And that was when he reached for her, not with urgency, with reverence. His fingers brushed the edge of her jaw, feather-light. His thumb traced the line beneath her cheekbone like he was learning her by memory. Her eyes fluttered closed, and he leaned in slowly, so slowly she could feel every second of hesitation. And then finally, his lips met hers. Soft, certain, unrushed. It wasn't a kiss of fireworks or fairy tales. It was a kiss of truth, of surrender, of two people who had walked through fire carrying their own ashes and somehow still found their way back to warmth. Her hand slipped up to the side of his neck, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss. There was no audience, no spotlight, just breath and skin and something sacred unfolding between them. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, eyes closed. He whispered, "Does this mean you're done running?" She smiled, just barely. "No promises." His laugh was quiet. "Fair." Then she looked at him, her voice steady now. "But I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere tonight." He reached for her hand, laced his fingers through hers. "Then stay," he said. They stood like that, wrapped in silence, holding on to something that had taken months and lifetimes to build. And in that moment, beneath the stars and hospital lights, neither of them was alone anymore. The following week was silent, but not in the old lonely way. It was the kind of silence that came when the noise inside you finally quiets down, when the storm passes and you realize you're still standing. Hannah spent her days between the hospital and the restaurant, which was now actively being renovated, with workers coming in, fresh paint being applied, chairs arriving wrapped in plastic. She tended to every detail as if she was rebuilding not just a place, but herself as well. Liam never asked if he could show up. He just came. Not every day, but enough to make Noah laugh, to help carry boxes, to bring breakfast wrapped in cloth napkins with notes that said things like, "You're allowed to be tired," or "You don't have to do it all alone." He never invaded. He offered. And Hannah accepted. On Saturday night, he invited her to dinner, but not in an elegant restaurant, nor in a private room. When she arrived at the address, she found a small wooden door beneath a marquee with twinkling lights. It was an old bistro, forgotten by many, that smelled of roasted garlic and cheap wine. Only 4 tables were occupied, all by elderly couples or noisy families. Hannah frowned when she entered. "This is unexpected." Liam rose from the corner table, smiling. "You said you hated places where you couldn't hear your own breath." She smiled, surprised. "And also," he said, pulling the chair out for her, "I wanted a place where no one knew us, where there were no cameras, just you, and me, and something real." The waiter brought fresh bread and oil with herbs. Hannah grabbed a piece absent-mindedly, looking around. "Are you sure this place passed the health inspection?" "Absolutely," he said. "I trust the kitchen." She raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you trust things you can't control?" "Since you entered my life." The words hung between them like a confession, simple, unprotected. And suddenly the world grew small. The table, the plate, the space between their eyes. She saw everything he didn't say there. What he had learned, what he had lost, what he was ready to give. After the main course, a risotto that Hannah described as emotionally confusing but deliciously needy, Liam stood up. For a moment, she thought he was leaving, or that he was going to personally order dessert. But then he circled the table and kneeled, and time stopped. Hannah became very still. The restaurant, the waiter, the radio playing some French music. Everything dissolved. "Before you say anything," Liam began, pulling a small box from his pocket, "this isn't about fixing something or proving something." He opened the box. The ring was simple. Gold. No extravagant stones. Just a subtle shine, as if to say that true promises don't need a stage. "I don't want perfect," he said. "I don't want a version of life that only looks good from the outside. I want real, messy, raw. I want a life with mismatched schedules and burned toast and waking up at 2 a.m. just to hear you breathe." Her eyes welled up. "I want a future with you. Not because I can't live without you, but because I don't want to. Because when I look at you, Hannah, I don't see the end of a story. I see the beginning of a life I didn't know I was allowed to have." Her breath caught in her throat. He extended the ring. "Will you marry me?" She looked at him, at the man who had everything, and had learned to offer, not impose, to stay, not run, to love, not control. And she saw not a billionaire, but someone willing to start over, side by side with her. "Yes," she whispered, "but only if you do the dishes when I burn dinner." He laughed, relieved, and slid the ring onto her finger. Deal. They didn't kiss immediately. They just looked at each other for far too long, like they understood that the words had already been said, and love, finally, was acknowledged. Then she pulled him close and said, with her forehead resting against his, "Let's go home." The ceremony wasn't extravagant. There were no drones overhead, no golden fountains or celebrity chefs flown in from other countries, no designer labels on display, no red carpets. Just a garden. One tucked behind the newly restored Brooks and Sons, filled with white chairs, string lights and wildflowers that Hannah had chosen herself. It was the first day of spring, and it felt exactly like a beginning. She stood beneath a wooden arch wrapped in ivy and baby's breath, wearing a soft ivory dress that didn't shimmer, but moved like wind. Her hair was down. Her smile was quiet. Noah, fully recovered and proudly suited, walked her down the aisle. Liam waited under the arch, his hands folded, a barely restrained smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. His eyes never left hers. Not when the music began, not when the guests stood, not even when she reached him, and he whispered. "You came," she whispered back, "told you I wasn't running." There were fewer than 40 guests, close friends, a few staff from the hospital, a neighbor who had brought Hannah soup the night her mother died, the lawyer who had finalized the transfer of the restaurant deed, Ethan and his wife, the head nurse who adored Noah like a son. No reporters, no photographers, just people who mattered. When the officiant asked them to speak their vows, Liam didn't pull out a piece of paper. He simply took her hands and said, "I used to think love was earned, that I had to become something, I'm someone, before I could deserve it. But then you showed up. You didn't ask for anything, you just saw me. And when I tried to impress you, you gave me honesty. When I tried to control everything, you gave me space, and when I fell apart, you stayed." He swallowed. "I don't want to promise perfection, but I can promise this. I will never leave. Not when it's hard, not when you're tired, not when life feels too heavy to carry. I'll carry it with you." Tears streamed down Hannah's cheeks before she even began hers. "I've spent most of my life trying to hold things together," she said, voice shaking. "Family, finances, dreams that were too big for our zip code. And somewhere along the way I forgot what it meant to be held. But then I met you." She paused to breathe. "And you didn't just offer help. You offered your heart. You didn't rescue me. You stood beside me until I remembered how to rescue myself. You reminded me that softness doesn't mean weakness, and that love doesn't mean losing myself." She looked into his eyes, steady and sure. "So I don't promise to always be calm or graceful, or even on time, but I promise to fight for us, to forgive, to laugh, to tell you the truth, even when it's hard, and to build something honest, one small, real moment at a time." When the rings were exchanged, their hands trembled, not from nerves, but from the weight of everything those bands would now carry. Not just love, but memory, loss, rebuilding, choice. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Liam took her face in both hands and kissed her like the moment deserved. Not rushed, not rehearsed, just right. The reception was held in the restaurant's back room, still smelling of fresh paint and new beginnings. Laughter echoed off the walls as Noah made a speech, followed by a toast from Ethan that ended with, "And if you ever hurt her, I will show up in court with a frying pan." Liam raised his glass solemnly. Noted. The food wasn't catered. Hannah had insisted on cooking part of it herself, with help from the original cafe staff, some of whom now worked at the restaurant. The menu was filled with dishes from her childhood, recipes handwritten in a notebook her mother had left behind. There was no wedding cake, just 3 tiers of lemon pie with toasted meringue, because cake is a scam, as Hannah had declared with finality weeks before. They danced slowly, barefoot, in the middle of the room, surrounded by string lights and quiet music. And at one point, Liam whispered, "Do you ever think about that hug in the airport?" She smiled against his chest. "Every day. I'm glad you made that mistake." "Me too." Then that night, long after the last guest had gone home, they sat alone in the restaurant kitchen, floor scattered with flower petals and confetti. No shoes, no noise, just them. And he said, "What now?" She looked at him, took his hand, and said, "Now we live." And that was the real beginning. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. Love doesn't always arrive when we're ready. Sometimes it shows up in the middle of chaos, uninvited, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. Hannah didn't fall in love with a billionaire. She fell in love with a man who stayed when it was hard, who listened without fixing, who gave back what life had taken from her, not with diamonds or promises, but with quiet presence and patient truth. And Liam? He didn't buy love. He learned it. Slowly. Imperfectly. With every moment he chose honesty over ego, humility over pride, and her again and again because real love doesn't live in luxury. It lives in small kitchens, hospital gardens, handwritten notes, and the kind of courage it takes to say, "I'm not leaving." So now ask yourself, what kind of love are you willing to fight for? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and continue sharing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone who still believes in the kind of love that doesn't ask for perfection, only presence.